I'm currently at our main lingerie factory in India. I'm going to be talking about fast fashion. Hi, I'm Katie from What Katie Did, and welcome back. Today I am definitely spilling the tea, as the kids say, and I'm going to be talking about fast fashion. I'm currently at our main lingerie factory in India, and well, I spend a week here sampling, and we spend a lot of downtime chatting about the industry and manufacturing, and it's a very, very close-knit affair. I've got lots of friends in the industry in the UK, so we know exactly what's happening there, and the guys here, they've got lots of friends in the industry, and they know what's happening with lots of other brands and lots of other factories in the area. And we've been spending a lot of time talking about fast fashion, and also that because the Western world, the price of fashion is under such intense pressure, everyone wants fashion cheaper, and the economics of fashion aren't that healthy at the moment, how this affects factories overseas and the pressures it puts on them. Firstly, I'm going to be very, very vague because, as I just said, it is a very close-knit community. I did a video in March last year about manufacturing in the UK, and one of my friends in the industry, she was watching it with her partner, and I was talking about factories in the UK, and her partner said to her, "Oh, I bet you wish you knew where they were." And she was like, "Yeah, I know where they are. Knowing where they are is the easy part," and it's very much the same here. Everyone knows everyone else, so I'm going to be intentionally vague. I'm not going to go into any more detail than fast fashion, the pressures of how things have to be made and the speed that they have to be made. I'm not going to even mention particular garments, simply because I don't want to get anyone into trouble. So whilst I have done my research and I know the brands involved, and they are, mainstream brands ranging from the very cheap around the US, the UK and Europe to mid-range fashion, well, the cheaper end of mid-range fashion. We're not talking at a designer level, we are talking not super cheap, but kind of the next level up. That's where we are, and I'm going to be discussing those. And there also is a bit of lingerie in there as well, but I'm not going to be any more precise than that, I'm afraid. And I have spoken to the guys in the factory here, and I have said this is what I'm going to be talking about, and they're fine with it. They're fine. I've gone through exactly what I'm going to say, and they're like, "Yeah, that's fine. Don't worry about that. That's okay." So don't ask me for any more details, because I really can't give them to you. So at What Katie Did, we work on an 8-week turnaround, which means I place the order on day 1 and it's shipped on week 8. And this gives us enough time, it gives the factory enough time to allow for festival days, which is their equivalent of bank holidays and public holidays. So they've just had Diwali last month in November, which is one of their biggest festivals of the year. And it allows everyone, the lights are going off and on now. I think we've had a power cut. But anyway, it allows everyone to spend, have time at home and then come back and be able to make up the order and make up the quantities without being put under any undue stress. And it also allows me to add a few items. If you have a run on something, I can say, "Oh, can you make a couple dozen more of these?" And they can do that without stressing the factory out too much. The other interesting thing about working for What Katie Did is that we make a wide variety of garments, so it's always interesting. And I've said in another video that the owner of the factory says his favourite time is when we're sampling and coming up with new designs, because it's so interesting to see them develop. And we were talking this time, and it says the machinists also enjoy it as well, because they enjoy making something new, and they're always changing. They might be doing the same thing for a week, but then they'll be moving on to a different product, so there's always variety in what they're making. But he did say that when you're working with fast fashion, you'll be making the same top for 3 months, and you'll be just doing the same seam day in, day out, 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, because he works 6 days a week in India, and it is just mind-numbingly boring. So yes, the machinists are getting paid fairly, but the job they're doing is not very interesting at all, and there is a pressure to get everything done in time because the profit margins are so slim. It's just churning out and churning out and churning out and not stopping and doing the same seam time and time again, which isn't very motivating, isn't very mentally stimulating. It's not a great position to be in. So that's one of the things that's happening with fast fashion now is it makes the job a lot less interesting than it used to be in the past. When we talk about fast fashion, the turnaround is a lot quicker, and we're talking about 3 weeks. So the company will place the order on day one, and they'll say the order has to be shipped on 3 weeks. If it's not shipped on the 3 weeks on the dot, then they'll get a fine. So their profit margin will be reduced. So they are put under an immense amount of pressure to get it done in those 3 weeks. And the thing is with larger companies is that they don't have the personal relationship, the buyers don't have the personal relationship with the factory, and the buyers themselves are under immense pressure to get the best price and obviously to get everything delivered on time. So the relationship they have is completely different to the relationship we have. And personally, also I found that the buyers in the UK, they do regularly change. They don't stay in the same job for very long at all. They're moved from department to department. And personally, I think this is to stop them building a close relationship with the factory, because if you become friends with the people you're working with, it's so much harder to say, I need it now, I don't care. Because this is what happens. If you've got a 3-week turnaround and the factory closes for 3 days for Diwali, then they are under a lot more pressure to get it done. The common perception when it comes to fast fashion is it's the machinists that are exploited. And I've been talking to everyone here, and basically the machinists get a set rate. They are paid on piecework, not in our factory, because we need it, because everything needs to be so precise. We can't say make it fast and you're paid on how many pieces you make. We want it made correctly. But on fast fashion, they are paid on piecework, so they're paid on their production. The squeezes that come from the price that the fashion company, the brand, is willing to pay for the items. And people. It's interesting because a guy in our factory was studying in the UK last year, and he said he was going to places like Primark, and he was like, how can they sell things so cheap? And when you look at high street brands in the UK, everyone thinks, how can these really, really price sensitive brands sell things so cheap? And he said one of the factories his friend works at, he manages, he says that it's come to the point where basically the factory doesn't make any money. The machinists get paid. And there is a scheme in India that when you export, you claim a certain amount of tax back. So a couple of years ago, you were able to export and you claim 11% back when the order was exported, and that is the profit margin, 11%. This year, they've reduced the profit margin to 7.5%. So now the pure profit margin of the factories is 7.5%. And next year, they're reducing it further to 5%, 5.5%. And everyone's in a bit of a quandary because they're not making the money. And basically, they're taking the orders, they're keeping the machines going. They're not making any money, and sooner or later something has to give, and there are factories closing in India because there is no point. The cherry on the cake for this is that the Indian government have a new scheme. They're introducing, they never used to really bother about tax for the working class because they didn't make enough money to be taxed, but now they've decided they're going to tax everyone. And they're going to backdate it 5 years. So they're going to the factories and actually backdating the tax for 5 years and making the factories pay the backdated tax for 5 years. So it's not coming out of employee salaries, it's not coming out of the machinist salaries, it's coming out of the factory. And the factories are already under pressure because they're not making any money, and now they're getting huge bills for 5 months, 5 years worth of income tax, which they weren't expecting, which the government has just suddenly put in, which is fair enough. You can never argue with tax and governments, but it's just, things are bad, and then suddenly the government were like, they don't care, they're making it even worse, and it's come to a point where things are really, really tough. And if you are a fan of fast fashion, and I admit I buy fast fashion, it's really, really hard to avoid, and you always have the odd dip, it's not going to be around forever because they're just not making any money. Times are just so tough. So one of the things that the factories are doing is moving to cheaper areas, and I've said they've moved to Cambodia and Vietnam and places like that. In India, they're actually moving factories to Ethiopia, and what they're doing is the Indians are building factories in Ethiopia. They're employing Ethiopians as tailors, and the managers and the management will be Indian, and this is working really well basically for everyone. We've got an associate who worked for an Ethiopian factory. He said the Ethiopians are amazing. They're really cheap, they work really hard, and their workmanship is amazing. The Ethiopian government has also got its head screwed on, because they've said that basically you build a factory, you work it for 10 years, then you walk away from it. You leave the machinery, you leave the factory, and then you walk away from it, and Ethiopia runs the factory. So basically the Ethiopians are building up their manufacturing, investing in it, and then being left with a fully working factories and machines, and everyone walks away happy. The Indians have 10 years to make their money, and at the end of it the Ethiopians have a fully working factory and are fully trained in manufacturing. So it's a win-win situation. The only really downside to this is having to work in a poorer country, and the guy we know who was working out there, he lasted 3 months. He said everyone to work with was great and everyone worked really hard, but it's moving to a poorer country, and whether you'd bring up your kids and your family there. He lasted 3 months, and he said, no, I'm sorry, Ethiopia isn't for me. So that's one of the ways of making manufacturing cheaper. The other pressure factories are being put under is timescales of how quickly they really have to make anything, and because financial constraints are being put on factories, the shops aren't making so much money, so they don't want to carry so much stock. And there's one brand we know of that we've been talking about, and they've forgotten about their 3-week turnaround. Their turnaround is 5 days, so they place the order on Monday and the order has to be shipped on Friday. And this is incredibly tough, because they've got no idea what's coming in. This could be a quiet week in March when they haven't sold anything, or it could be the beginning of November when everyone's stocking up for Christmas, and the buyers, not their concern. You know, the factory has to make it. They got 5 days to make it. It could be a huge order, it could be a tiny order. So it's just putting a huge amount of pressure. It's just putting a huge amount of pressure on the people who own the factories and the machinists who are making the stuff, because if they don't make it in time, then the suppliers get fined. They end up in a mess. They make even less money than they're making at the moment, and it's just putting a huge amount of pressure on everyone to try and get things done. So it's not a very happy tale, really. I mean, even in a factory like us, we've only got a few people here. There's still pressures there's always pressures somewhere along the line. And a couple of years ago, we ran out of fabric, and it was in the run-up to Christmas, and we had to rush through to get stock for Christmas. And so I was putting pressure under the factory owner, saying, it's Christmas, you knew it was Christmas, how can you run out of fabric? We really need to stock to sell, because we don't have any stock to sell, then what are we going to do? So I was putting pressure under the factory owner. The factory owner was putting pressure under the line manager. Poor line manager. He had an amazing seamstress who could just use this one machine. She decided to go on vacation for 2 weeks, and he was like just doing his head in, because it's like she disappeared on a not very important holiday. I mean, yes, she was entitled to take the time off, but he was like, do you really need to go now? But I'm desperate. So he was under a lot of pressure as well. And when this is working for a company, the way we all understand each other, and we can say, listen, we've had a festival day, we've had a disaster, look, we need to work through this. Whereas with the bigger brands, it's just tough. This is what you signed up to, this is the way it is. If you can't do it, we either make it somewhere else, or we fine you, and that's it. So this is how manufacturing is so cheap at the moment, and it's not going to last. Basically, if you like fast fashion, buy it now, because in 20 years' time it won't be around. And not only because we won't be able to move to cheaper factories, but also a lot of the factories, as I mentioned earlier, are closing, so there'll only be a few factories left. There won't be enough factories to make cheap fashion, so it's a case of you might not even be getting better quality, you'll just be paying a lot more simply because there aren't enough people making the items. So all in all, it's a bit of a sorry tale. It's probably a little bit different to what you expected, but this is what's happening at the end of 2019 today, and it'll be interesting to watch it over the next 5 years as to see what happens. If you do have any questions about fast fashion or manufacturing in the UK or overseas, please get in touch. But as I said earlier, please be aware that I can't go into a great amount of detail or brand names or even specific clothing types, because I just don't want to get anyone into trouble. I release a new video every week, so keep an eye on our channel, and in the meantime, take care, and I'll catch up with you soon.